Hello, good to see you. Pastor Sam with the devotion from Mark 15. Today going to be talking about Jesus in his trial before Pilate and maybe kind of getting into a little bit of Jesus being mocked and led away to the cross. Not going to talk about the actual crucifixion yet today. That'll be maybe next time. We may not get as far as I think. I'm going to kind of see where we are about halfway through and then go from there. If we can talk about everything today, we will. If I've said a lot already in the first half, then we'll just cut it off and pick up the next time. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So I think we're going to read just the first section and talk about it, and then I'm going to see where we are on the time, and we may do another section today. But verses 1 through 15. And as soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. And they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." And the chief priests accused him of many things. And Pilate again asked him, "Have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate was amazed. Now at the feast he used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked. And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he usually did for them. And he answered them, saying, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him up. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. And Pilate again said to them, "Then what shall I do with the man you call the king of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Crucify him." And Pilate said to them, "Why, what evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas. And having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Okay. So if you watched last time's devotion, we talked about Jesus being seized and questioned by the kind of Jewish religious leaders. And they were functioning as something of a local police agency, to sort of bring it into modern terms, because terms like Sanhedrin are altogether foreign to us. You maybe have heard that word before, but you'd be hard-pressed to define what exactly it is. I'd be hard-pressed to define exactly what it is. We're unaccustomed to religious leaders functioning in sort of a governmental, official state capacity, which is kind of what happens at the end of chapter 14 with the questioning. We're unused to, not used to, unfamiliar with religious people seizing people and questioning them. So there's just a lot of foreignness to the whole process, which can sort of lead us to the conclusion, why do we have kind of this double trial, so to speak? And it's because the whole event is actually following the established customs of the Roman Empire. And sort of broadly, what would happen is if there was some kind of troublemaker, right? Kind of what we might call a felony, right? This wouldn't necessarily happen for kind of misdemeanor, minor crimes, but for something like a felony, right? Murder, insurrection, I don't know, burglary, right? Things that are like major crimes. The local police forces, the kind of local authorities who in Jerusalem happen to be the temple authorities, the chief priests, would seize, not arrest, they didn't have authority to arrest, they would seize the troublemaker, and they would question the troublemaker to sort of figure out, is the rumor that's circulating about this person actually true? And at the end of chapter 14, the Jewish leadership substantiated the claim that Jesus is the Son of God, right? Jesus is at least claiming to be the Son of God. And so they have done their part, right? They seized the troublemaker, Jesus. They ascertained with certainty that the rumor about him being the Son of God, that Jesus at least believes that. And there's, if we get to our second section, there's a great deal of irony in the way that the soldiers treat Jesus that reflects his kingship, even though those performing the actions do not believe in his kingship. But anyway, the Jewish religious leaders have substantiated the claim, and so here they're turning Jesus over to Pilate, which is what we get in verse 1. They're kind of talking about what to do, so they bind him and lead him away and give him to Pilate. That would be the next step. Chapter 14 would be kind of like police officers bringing someone in and questioning them. Hey, did you commit this crime? You know, we have witnesses who saw you commit this crime. We have, again, using kind of today's terminology. And again, I watch a lot of police shows, so you know everything I know is totally accurate. But we have photographs and cameras and different things, and we have your prints on the murder weapon. And again, these are all from TV shows. I don't know how police actually do this. But let's assume, and the police find out, yes, this person did actually commit this crime. So are they guilty of it? Well, we don't know yet, right? The religious leaders are kind of acting like the police would. The police got the troublemaker, they brought him in, they figured out, yes, in all likeliness, he did commit the crime. So Jesus did commit the crime of being the Son of God. Now they hand him over to Pilate, which would be kind of like police officers handing someone over to the courts, right? The police in and of themselves are not authorized to finally assess the guilt of an individual. The police officers themselves may firmly believe that such a person is guilty. They may have they hopefully have collected evidence that shows the person is guilty, but they are not authorized to make that final determination. That's what the courts are for. So if a person's convicted of a felony, or I guess charged with a felony, I should try to use as precise language as I am capable of using. If they're charged with a felony, then they have to go through a court trial to assess whether they are actually guilty. And that's what's happening here in chapter 15. So there's not a repetition any more than there is a repetition today between the work of police officers and then the work of judges and court staff. Right? To some degree, it is, I won't say a pointless repetition. It's not pointless because that's the way our legal system is designed, so it's working as it's designed, but there is a lot of repetition that takes place today. Did you commit this crime? Here we have this evidence, the same evidence, probably, that the police officers brought out before the person that they believe committed the crime, right? They have this evidence showing that this person committed this crime. Now they have to lay it out before a judge and before a jury or whatever it all is, and sort of make the same moves, do the same things that they just got done doing. There's a lot of repetition because that's the way it's designed to work. There's a lot of repetition here because this is the way that it's designed to work. And it actually does, now that I lay all that out, it mirrors our American legal system like incredibly closely. So this talking it out has helped me to kind of understand what looks like duplication is actually just the process playing itself out. So now, chapter 15, chapter 14 is the police officers questioning Jesus. Chapter 15 is like the actual courtroom setting. So if the accusers screw something up, if there's like a mistrial, then Jesus gets off on a technicality, right? Jesus has, in his own words, claimed to be, well, the Son of the Blessed, but the Son of God. But if Pilate's verdict is not guilty, Jesus can get off, right, and not be crucified, which again we know that Jesus must be crucified. So Pilate asks him the very precise question, are you the king of the Jews? Yeah. Now, if you remember at the end of chapter 14, there was a lot of different witnesses being called forward by, I'm just going to use current terminology, the police forces, the religious leaders, to try to establish what crimes has Jesus committed. But this is the one that's sort of stuck. He's claiming to be the Son of God. He's claiming to be... Now, as we make the transition from Jerusalem to Rome, from the Jewish religious authorities to the Roman governmental authorities, Pilate doesn't care if Jesus is the Son of God, right? Because we're all sons of God, sons of the gods, I guess I should say. So if the charge that the religious leaders bring is that Jesus claims to be the Son of God, well, Pilate doesn't care about that. Even if that should be true, that doesn't mean anything. So Pilate's like, okay, he's the Son of God, like, next. But if someone is claiming to be the king, that is very important to Pilate. Because Pilate has a pretty nice job for himself, and he wants to not screw things up with Caesar and lose this really nice job. So if there's a guy who's claiming to be the king, and especially the king of the Jews, who are sort of an uppity faction within the Roman Empire, they tend to want to stir up trouble, and they tend to want to rebel fairly frequently. If somebody's coming and claiming to be the king of the Jews, well, that's bad news for Rome. And if it happens on Pilate's watch, then that's especially bad news for Pilate. He might not just lose his job, he might get killed. So Pilate's kind of got some skin in the game. He's not this like dispassionate, detached observer, right? Pilate has a vested interest in bringing this whole situation to a conclusion. Not necessarily the proper conclusion, not necessarily the conclusion that Pilate in his own mind believes, because at the end of the day, is an individual, any individual anywhere, more interested in doing what's right for some random dude or in doing what's right for them? Well, we like to tell ourselves that we would do justice for someone else, but at the end of the day, we're really concerned about number one. So Pilate, at bottom, wants to stay, I don't know what his official title is, governor of Judea. He wants to stay in the position he's got. He wants to make everything run smoothly. He wants to get through Passover, where all the uppity people are all gathered together, and the chance for riot and rebellion is extremely high. He wants to get through that, send everybody back on their merry way, and then he can go back to his palace on the Mediterranean and hang out on the beach for like the rest of the year. That's what Pilate wants. He just wants to resolve this quickly and as pleasantly, well, pleasantly is kind of a bad word, but pleasantly as possible. So he asks, are you the king of the Jews? Now notice that's not what we asked at the end of 14. There was no mention of being the king of the Jews, but the Son of God is by default the king of the Jews. So there is kind of some equivalency as these two phrases come together, as we transition from Son of the Blessed, Son of God, to King of the Jews. The one is the other, right? And Jesus says, you have said so. Now again, doesn't give a direct yes. The answer to this question is yes. And Jesus, I don't want to just say Jesus believes that he's the king of the Jews, because he actually is the king of the Jews. But he sort of, this is another way to say yes without saying yes. Like, you said it yourself. So let's not hear this as Jesus trying to like dodge responsibility. Remember, at each step along the way, Jesus has been pushing himself towards the cross. He's been giving his opponents what they need to crucify him. Jesus, if you remember at the end of last chapter, he remains silent throughout all of the witnesses, and then finally when they ask him, "Are you the Son of the Blessed?" he says, "Yes." He finally says something, and so he seals his own fate. Jesus must go to the cross. And so he's going to take action to commit himself and to further himself on that path to the cross. So the chief priests accuse him of many things. Ultimately, these charges are irrelevant. Because notice what Pilate says of him. "Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews? What shall I do with the man you call the King of the Jews?" Now, we're not going to get into this today regardless. But when the inscription of the charge against him read, "the King of the Jews," so he is charged with, he is convicted of the crime of claiming to be the King of the Jews. That is the singular charge that kind of runs through this whole chapter, that Jesus is the King of the Jews. So these myriad charges or accusations that the chief priest makes are ultimately irrelevant. Jesus does not respond to them, which is what verse 5 tells us. He makes no further answer. Pilate says, "Look at what they're all saying. Don't you have anything to say about this?" These other charges, from Jesus' perspective, are irrelevant. Jesus has answered the main one, the most important one, the one that will secure him a death sentence. If you're sentenced to death for crime 1, even if you've committed crimes 2 through 10, they really don't matter. Whether you're found guilty or innocent of them, if a person's condemned to death, like, you can't kill someone twice. You can't die. Right? So, this is a little bit cynical, but somebody who's committed a capital offense might as well just go nuts, right? And do whatever they jolly well please. Because if you're convicted, if you're sentenced to death, whether you're sentenced to death for 1 crime or 100 crimes, you can only die the once. So these other, now I'm not telling people to go commit crimes. These other things don't matter. And so notice how Mark just jumps over them totally in summary fashion. They accuse him of things. And really, I would say the reason that we get this is so that Jesus can again, kind of the words of Isaiah 53 are going to ring through this chapter. "Like a sheep before her shearer is silent, so he opened not his mouth." Jesus makes no answer. He's silent before his accusers. Okay, so Pilate delivers Jesus to be crucified. Good section heading. We get this sort of a side development. If we're talking about the development of, I'm going to use narrative terms, not to imply a lack of truthfulness, but just because the gospel is, it's a story, not in the sense that it's not true, but there are characters and there is action and there is development of themes, right? It's written in the way that a story would be written. So we get this kind of aside development of plot that, oh, by the way, in case you didn't know this, at Passover time, Pilate would release any one prisoner. Did you know that? Well, I didn't know that. I mean, I knew that, but I knew that from here. I didn't know that because I didn't grow up Jewish. So the people who are hearing this gospel or reading this gospel could very well be unfamiliar with Passover customs. And Mark is going to bring out, hey, there's this thing that happens. At the Passover, any prisoner can get released. And now we would kind of expect 6 to be followed by 8. There's this thing that happens, and the people ask Pilate to do the thing that happens. But that's not what happens. We get verse 7. And Mark is intentionally introducing Barabbas ahead of time. Not all that far ahead of time, because come verse 11, they're going to ask to release this guy. So it's not all that far away that we find out about him. But there's kind of an illogical insertion. At the feast he used to release for them one prisoner, they came up and asked him to release for them the prisoner. That's kind of the flow of logic that we would expect. But Mark is interrupting that to give us details about this Barabbas figure. Rebel, again, robber, we'll find out. I'm skipping ahead a little bit. Where is it? And they put 2 robbers. Where do they have that? Maybe I can't find it. Oh, okay, here, 27. With him they crucified 2 robbers, right? The word robber makes us think somebody who stole stuff. But this word is a synonym for this word, rebel. I use the word bandit, brigand. Brigand is not a word we use very much. Bandit is a word that we maybe use sometimes. Rebel, who had committed murder, right? So these robbers down here in 27 could very likely be murderers, and almost certainly were murderers for the simple fact that they're receiving a death sentence. One would not receive the death sentence of crucifixion for simply stealing things. So this is not to be understood as somebody who stole things, but more along the lines of an individual like Barabbas who committed murder and who is an insurrectionist, right? So sort of a double crime there. Committing insurrection and also committing murder. He's a bad dude, right? He's a bad dude. Now, his name, Bar, if you remember, which gospel is it? I think it's Matthew, where Peter confesses Jesus to be the Christ, and Jesus says, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar Jonah," right? Simon, son of Jonah. So Bar, son of Abba. We saw that word last chapter, where Jesus was praying, where he said, Abba, Father. So Bar, Abba, son of the Father, right? Barabbas' name means son of the Father. Oh, isn't that strange? Because he's being juxtaposed with Jesus, whose charge is, at least in chapter 14, whose charge is being the Son of the Father, right? The Son of God, the Son of the Blessed. So they ask for the Son of the Father, Barabbas, to be released, and they sentence to death the actual Son of the Father. So there's this exchange going on. They want the guilty Son of the Father to be released, and they want the innocent Son of the Father to be charged with death and with crucifixion. They want Jesus. Now, I think John's gospel gives us a little bit more insight, and we'll kind of talk about the Pilate and some of his. I will. What's the word? I will give my opinion about Pilate's internal state and Pilate's thought process. We will. I can't think of the word. Oh well. Posit? That's not the word I wanted. Where in the world was I going with this? Oh, John tells us that Pilate thinks Jesus is actually innocent of the crime, so to speak, of being the king of the Jews, which is altogether missing from here. But they want the innocent one, Jesus, to be convicted, and they want the guilty one, Barabbas, to be let off. Which is, this switch is what the cross is all about. That we, the guilty ones, are let off the hook, and Jesus, the innocent one, takes our place. So this switch is not just, oh shoot, Jesus missed his chance. This switch is a very intentional, very theological event. The guilty person gets let go. And the innocent one, Jesus, will suffer and die in his place. Barabbas should have been one of these guys, right? Barabbas could have been one of these guys, one of the robbers crucified with Jesus. That's what Barabbas deserved. We, by the way, would deserve to die for our sins, whether by crucifixion or whether by some other way. This is what we deserve. But, like Barabbas, we get let off the hook. God lets us off the hook because God punishes Jesus. So even though we have committed, maybe not crimes against the laws of the country, but we have committed, I'll use the word crimes, in God's eyes. We have broken God's laws, and we are therefore criminals in God's eyes. Whether we consider those crimes to be small or large, many or few, we are nonetheless criminals in God's eyes, but God does not treat us as criminals. God makes the same kind of exchange, that we who are guilty are let off the hook, and Jesus, the innocent one, suffers and dies in our place. He swaps position with us. Another way to talk about the death of Jesus. We've got lots of different ways and methods of talking about the death of Jesus. Okay. So, the crowd wants Pilate to release a prisoner. Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews? I'm going to go through, I want to kind of review the action here. So Pilate says, do you want me to release him? We get a little bit of Pilate's internal thoughts, perceive that it was out of envy. The chief priests stir up the crowd to release Barabbas. Pilate asks again, what shall I do with the King of the Jews? And they say, crucify him. We get kind of a third question, why, what evil has he done? But they keep shouting, crucify him. So Pilate wants to satisfy the crowd and delivers Jesus to be crucified. Okay, so what's my goal here is not to accuse Pilate of anything, nor is it to get him off the hook. My goal in this section is to kind of explore the tense relationship between Jerusalem and Rome. There are perhaps multiple reasons why Pilate would have asked this question. It's kind of a leading question. So in verse 8, they ask Pilate to release a prisoner. That's what we found out in verse 6. He would release a prisoner that they ask for. And the question that he asks them is a leading question. Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews? Now, it is entirely possible to read this and to understand it, and for it to be such that Pilate is trying to get Jesus released, to get Jesus off the hook. But remember that Jesus has to go to the cross. So despite, if we read it, and we're going to kind of read through it that way, and it is possible to understand the section in that way, that Pilate in himself wants to get Jesus off the hook. If we're going into it with that mindset, we have to understand from the get-go that Pilate can't be successful in that regard. If it is the case that Pilate wants Jesus to go free, that cannot occur. Jesus must go to the cross. He asks this leading question, do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews? Nowhere in here, and again, some of the other Gospels really help to kind of flesh this out a little bit more. Nowhere in here does it say that Barabbas is in the mix at all. So we just know that there is this individual called Barabbas who is in prison. So where exactly does he enter the scene? Well, presumably It could be here, right? Jesus wants to release, or Pilate wants to release Jesus because he thinks that the chief priests have delivered Jesus out of envy, and then it could be the case that at the end of verse 10 he goes down, and I'm sure Pilate doesn't do it, he sends a soldier, but Pilate goes down into prison, he gets the worst possible dude he can think of, Barabbas, and brings up Barabbas and says, "Who shall I release?" And then again, and then verse 11, the chief priests stir up the crowd to release Barabbas. They're like, whoever Pilate brings out, we're going to vote for him because we don't want to vote for Jesus. So this is the point where Barabbas is chosen. "What shall I do with the man you call the King of the Jews?" And so they say, "Crucify him." Which is what, if Jesus is found guilty of that charge, that is what would occur. If he is found if he is found guilty of claiming to be a king, the charge would be death. And it would be death by crucifixion. So this, in verse 13, this is not an unexpected response. Nor is this a leading response, as if Pilate were assuming what are all the different verdicts or things that I can do with Jesus, right? What are the different punishments that I can give? There's really just the one. If someone's claiming to be a king, they're going to die. They're going to die. And the Romans basically kill people just the one way, unless you're a Roman citizen. They crucify them. So this is not, Pilate doesn't have a wealth of options that he can do with Jesus at this point. And the Jewish people are saying crucify. What I'm trying to show is that the Jews are not necessarily responsible for the death of Jesus. And I know that's kind of a leap now that I've said that, but it's not as though Pilate is considering all these different things. And here in verse 13, the crowd says, "Crucify him," and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's right, that's one of the things that I can do." And then they shout out again, who's responsible for the death of Jesus? We kind of talked about that last time. Well, God is. God is. "I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered," God says of himself. Who's responsible for the death of Jesus? Well, Peter says some things in Acts. You delivered him up, right? Which is what they do here in verse 1. Who's responsible for the death of Jesus? Ultimately, God. Secondarily, Pilate, because Pilate delivers Jesus to be crucified. In a tertiary way, the religious leaders. But we're not answering this question to assign blame, right? These people are not guilty of war crimes, and we're trying to assess their guilt. Jesus is very much in control of his own destiny. Now, it may be the case that Pilate wants Jesus to go free. And he's brought out Barabbas, the worst possible dude he can think of, to try to show them, hey, you're going to let this murderer go free instead of Jesus, and yeah, they're going to let this murderer go free. It may be the case that he simply wants to satisfy the crowd and to keep his own job. But I don't believe that is the case. I don't believe that Pilate genuinely wants to let Jesus go. If Pilate genuinely wanted to let Jesus go, he would have let Jesus go. Pilate has the final authority to do whatever in the world he wants. Pilate also has enough troops to be able to reinforce whatever decision he arrives at. Rome, broadly, has plenty of troops in 70 AD to annihilate the city of Jerusalem and to demolish the temple. So if Pilate actually wanted Jesus to go free, if that was his core and deep desire, He has the wherewithal, authority, and power to make that happen. And that's what leads me to believe that he does not honestly want Jesus to go free. He's not trying to get Jesus off the hook, because if he believed Jesus was innocent, and if he wanted Jesus to go free, even if the crowd had already asked for Barabbas, he could have just said, all right, I'm releasing Jesus. Off you go. Called in the National Guard, so to speak, and made examples of anyone who wanted to riot. That's what could have occurred. Now, if that did occur, Jesus doesn't die on the cross, and Jesus needs to die on the cross. So let's rewind a little bit, and let's look at Pilate a little bit different way. There's this tense relationship between Rome and Jerusalem. So tense, in fact, that in 70 AD, Rome is going to, like I said, destroy Jerusalem and demolish the temple to the state that it stands this day, right? For just short of 2,000 years, the temple has been in complete disarray. Pilate is, I think Pilate is sort of using this opportunity to show the Jewish people who's in charge. Because they have to bring this captured, this seized person to Pilate. The Jewish authorities do not have the authority, Jewish leaders do not have the authority to sentence Jesus to death. They would like very much to do that. They don't have the authority to kill him. If they did, they would be murderers. Pilate alone has the authority to sentence someone to death. Pilate is the man in charge. And so the whole of Jerusalem is really beholden to Pilate. Whatever he says goes. He'll do whatever he wants to do. So I think his question in verse 9 is a little bit more sinister than it first seems. Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews? You have brought me this man that you claims to be the King of the Jews. You have brought me, you Jewish leaders have brought me this man who thinks, and this man thinks he is your king, but you obviously don't think he's your king. Do you know who's your king? Caesar is your king, right? I'm the representative. If I can kind of put some words in Pilate's mouth, I'm the Son of God, right? Because again, Caesar claimed to be a god. So Pilate is the Son of God in that he is a representative of Caesar. He is an authorized individual acting in the stead and on the behalf of Caesar. So even though Barabbas' name means Son of the Father, even though Jesus is actually the Son of the Father, it's really Pilate who is the acting son of the Father, Caesar, right? Pilate is the man in charge. And so I think this question is a little bit toying with them. The Jewish leaders have brought Jesus. They have handed him over to Pilate, accusing him of a crime that deserves death. So Pilate says to them, what if I release him instead? You've done all this work. You've spent all night. You're all flustered and all upset. Your cheeks are red. Your forehead is bulging, right? I can see the vein running across your forehead. What if I release him? What are you going to do now? I think Pilate is kind of pressing his thumb in the open wound that is Rome. The Jewish people collectively have this wound called Rome, and they would very much like to heal themselves of this wound called Rome. And so Pilate is just like jamming his thumb in this open, sore wound. You've made this whole plot to seize this guy, to question this guy, to turn him over to me. You've done all this work. What if I just let him go? What are you going to do? And the answer would be nothing. The two answers are nothing or die, right? If I need to call in the Roman centurions, they're going to come swinging swords. And they're not just going to cut off ears. They're going to cut off heads. If I release Jesus, you guys just got to deal with it. So I don't think he asks this question in an honest attempt to get Jesus off the hook. I think he asks this question to show them that they are utterly powerless. Pilate is in charge. Whatever Pilate says goes. Whatever Pilate does is what's going to happen. And so I think he's toying with them. He can see, again, like I said earlier, the vein in their forehead is like sticking all the way out. Their blood pressure is like 200 over 150, right? The chief priests and the scribes and all the dudes, they're like beyond upset. They're about ready to have a heart attack and burst an aneurysm, right? They're so upset about this Jesus guy. And so Pilate is going to have a little joke with him. He's like, I'm just going to release him. Wouldn't that be funny? Right? Wouldn't it be a laugh if I just let this guy go? Wouldn't that be funny for everybody but you? And so I think that he goes down and he gets the worst scummy criminal he can find. Right? The worst of the worst. And he puts forth, hey crowd. I think he's doing this again to jab at the religious leaders. There's no way the crowd is going to vote for this scummy criminal Barabbas. So I can let Jesus go and show you I'm the one in charge, and I'm going to get your own people to do it. So Pilate presents Barabbas or Jesus. He's twisting the knife in the back of the Jewish people, the knife that is Rome. It's like, we are in charge, you are not. Deal with it. But here is maybe a surprising turn for Pilate, that the chief priests stir up the crowd and they ask for Barabbas. So one of Pilate's ploys is kind of thwarted. So he says again, what do you want me to do with the man you call the King of the Jews? Again, what if I let him go? Wouldn't that be funny? So they say, crucify him. And this is maybe the turning point. Well, maybe Barabbas is the turning point. But this is maybe the turning point where Pilate is kind of thinking to himself, okay, how much trouble am I going to get in if I have to call in the centurions and there's this whole big riot and I have to kill like half the people in Jerusalem? Can I explain that to Caesar? He's kind of maybe thinking about that to himself. He's like, as funny as it would be to release Jesus, that's a lot of paperwork. I don't want to do paperwork. And so the crowd is yelling, crucify him. He gives one more poke at them. Why? What evil has he done? Because stepping outside of Pilate the boss, the claim that Jesus is the King of the Jews is actually true. He's not falsely making that claim. Jesus is not falsely making that claim. That's a true claim. He is the King of the Jews. So he hasn't... This question, what evil has he done? The answer is none. None, right? Jesus has done no evil. But the crowd keeps shouting, so Pilate realizes he can't go through... Well, he could go through with his joke. But what is Caesar going to think? Pilate would really like to stay governor of Judea. He really likes that palace on the Mediterranean Sea. It's kind of a cushy job. He doesn't want to have to explain himself to Caesar for the sake of having a joke. So, no rebellion today, right? Everybody just calm down. Let your veins sink back into your foreheads. He wants to satisfy the crowd. He releases Barabbas, scourges Jesus, and delivers him to be crucified. So again, who's ultimately responsible for the death of Jesus? God. God. I guess secondarily, Jesus himself. It is the will of the Father that Jesus should suffer. Jesus has himself given his opponents and enemies the tools necessary to destroy him. Third, Pilate is the one who gives the order for Jesus to be crucified. The Romans will carry out the crucifixion of Jesus. I believe Pilate is a little bit more sinister, at least as far as Mark describes him, a little bit more sinister than maybe he appears, wanting to potentially have some fun with Jerusalem and to show them Rome is in charge. We let you guys kind of play house, but this is all our stuff. And if you guys are too uppity, 70 AD, we'll just destroy the house. Like, it's cute and all that you think this is your country and your temple and all that, whatever. And as long as you guys acknowledge that Rome is in charge, we can kind of coexist. But there reaches a point, again, kind of long after, this takes place, we think in about 33 AD, the death of Jesus. So not till 70 AD, and we know 70 AD, that Jerusalem is destroyed, but Jerusalem does eventually get destroyed. This antagonistic attitude, this tense relationship continues until Rome is finally like, we're done. We're done. We haven't been playing nice, but we're done using the kitty gloves. So they take off the kitty gloves and they come in and they just decimate everyone and everything. Just like, whoosh, done. No presumption of rebellion, no feeble attempts to free yourselves. There is a reason that Rome controls Europe, Asia, Northern Africa, the Middle East. Rome controls like everything. There's a reason for that. They have good soldiers, right? If people try to fight against Rome, they just get straight killed. So Pilate has a little bit of an attempt at a joke. He finds out that his joke needs to be over because he doesn't want to have to go to Rome and explain himself to Caesar and potentially get fired or kicked out or killed or any of that nonsense. So one joke is not worth his position. He'll send Jesus to be crucified, which I guess we'll get to next time. That's kind of, I kind of figured this would take us long enough to go through. Anyway, we'll pray, and then I'll turn you loose. Dear Lord God, you give up your only begotten Son for us sinful people. Lord, help us to acknowledge the immense love that you show to us in sacrificing your Son and the love that Jesus has for us. Help us to respond to that with our thanksgiving, with the acts and words of our lives. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Okay, thanks so much for tuning in. We're going to keep going. Next time we will lead up to the crucifixion. We probably won't get there yet. Just kind of looking at chapter 15. Time after, we'll talk about the death of Jesus. Burial of Jesus might be on its own. Anyway, we got lots more to do. Eventually, we'll get to the cross and to the empty tomb. So come back then. Join me. God's peace be with you.